Hi, welcome to Africa in Perspective. My name is Nelda and I make videos about Africa from Mondays to Fridays. The question of the day is, what exactly were Africans doing when Europeans were discovering the world and when Europeans were advancing technology? Because a lot of people think Sub-Saharan Africans in particular, so black people with my skin color, we were just chilling in the palm trees, we were chasing zebras, we were sacrificing people to the tree gods. But that is not what we're doing. We already had philosophy, we had mathematics, we had science, we had medicine, we had so many things going on in our societies, in our communities before colonialism happened. And I think the reason I'm doing this video is in part because one of my subscribers asked me to do it. And the other reason is Africans have forgotten who they are. We have sort of delved into a victim mindset. And I want to start dealing with that first, because for us to be able to make a change as a continent, we need to change our mindsets. We need to remember who we are. So we're going to look at 5 kingdoms in the African continent that were already doing great things. We were trading globally with China, with Persia, with India. So we're trading gold, copper, ivory before the European colonization came onto the continent. So we're going to immediately start with the Mali Empire, because it's one of the most famous empires. Everybody talks about it. A lot of men on TikTok are saying, oh, men think about the Roman Empire every day. I think you should be thinking about the Mali Empire, because a lot of you already know exactly what I'm going to say. The Mali Empire was the king of kings when it comes to gold. Speaking of kings, they're famously known for Mansa Musa, who, as you can see, his skin color was obviously black, because a lot of people have tried to say Mansa Musa was not a black person, but y'all hate to see us winning. Mansa Musa was a black man. He was a leader, trader, well connected. In 1324, Mansa Musa took a pilgrimage to Mecca, and on his way, he carried roughly 12 tons of gold, 60,000 people, 100 camels in his caravan, and when that happened, he was able to crush Cairo's economy for 10 years. They were still recovering from one trip that a black African man took. Do you guys understand that level of influence? So let's not sit behind today and be like, oh my God, we're victims. We're so small. We're not small. We have never been small. This Mansa Musa guy was one of us. He had the same blood that we have in our veins today. So let's remember that the Mali kingdom was just absolutely amazing. They were also known for the University of Timbuktu. And with the University of Timbuktu in particular, they studied astronomy, they studied mathematics, they had over 25,000 students. Do you comprehend? It is one of the oldest universities in the world. I mean, obviously, it's not like in operation, it's not giving out certificates, and you cannot say, oh, I graduated from the University of Timbuktu today. But it was one of the earliest establishments where people went to study. They had over 700,000 manuscripts. Let's remember that this is where we come from. We come from a people who studied, people who were curious, people who had a hunger for knowledge. We're not people with low IQ. Because I see this narrative going through on the internet, especially people saying Africans are not successful because they're low IQ. Africa is not developing because people are just lazy. We're not lazy. We've never been lazy. I think we're in survival mode, but we need to remember exactly who we were. Okay. The next kingdom we're going to be looking at is the Zimbabwe kingdom, the Shona kingdom, the Great Zimbabwe. Now, a lot of people don't really know about this, which is very strange, because the Great Zimbabwe kingdom is known for its architecture. Now, it is not going to look exactly like what you'd see in European architecture, but the Great Zimbabwe kingdom built massive stone structures without using mortar. Mortar is, the way I understand it, is the simplest way. It's just cement, and what else do you put? Water, maybe? I'm not a builder, guys. I'm not a builder. I'm just a girl. But they built these massive stone structures, and they could house up to 8,000 people. Okay, 18,000 people actually, and it was bigger than most European towns. The Great Zimbabwe Kingdom, they exported gold, and they also worked with China very closely, because there's actually Chinese artifacts from the Ming Dynasty that were found in Zimbabwe. These people were already in contact with the Chinese. The Zimbabwe people as well, the Shona people in particular, because they were part of the Great Zimbabwe Kingdom, they also worked very closely with the Swahili people along the Swahili Coast, which we're going to be talking about very shortly. But when you look at that sort of architecture that the Shona people are already doing, without using cement, without using lime, all these fancy schmancy things that the European came with their buildings, this is something that they were doing already. The conical tower and the soapstone bird carvings, look at that. Just look at that. And people trying to tell us that we were just lazy sitting around. They did that with their hands. They did not have any machines. They did not have any tools. They look at how smooth the structure of these little birds are. This is what we could do as a people. Don't you forget that. Don't you ever forget that. Great Zimbabwe built stone cities that traded with China while Europe was still fighting with knights, doing crusades and all of that. So we're not a small people. We're not a lazy people. We're not just people who are just chilling around. We're industrious. And I want every single African to remember that it is in our blood to be industrious. The next kingdom that we're going to be talking about is actually not a kingdom, which is very strange because I'm including it here. But the Swahili Coast, the Swahili people are very complicated people. And I'm saying that because I'm a Swahili person. But I mean, historically, I'm not. But Tanzania now, the Swahili is what we do. And I'm just going to take credit for everything that the Swahili people did. But the Swahili Coast is very special in the sense that it combined, it spanned across, you could argue it's three countries, but technically it's two. It's technically Tanzania and Kenya. But there are two cities in Tanzania, Kilwa and Zanzibar, that were very heavily involved in trade along the Swahili coast, as well as Mombasa, which is in Kenya. You could also argue Malindi was in there. Now, the Swahili city-states traded mostly gold as well, so they took gold from other parts of the continent and they traded it with India and China. They used dhows, which look like boats, but they have like, I'm inserting a picture, but I don't know why I'm drawing this for you as well. But they are meant to help them sail. These people had to navigate monsoon winds. Do you know how hard that is? There's no Google Maps, there's no GPS systems. They had to navigate monsoon winds. They had to know the seasons. They had to know the times when to travel. They had to estimate how to pack the spices so that they don't rot or nothing happens to them. They had to learn preservation methods. All these things went into the trade. And you're trying to tell me that we are low IQ. You must be crazy. Kilwa has a lot of history to the sense that when Ibn Battuta, and I know some of you know Ibn Battuta, he was a great traveler. He traveled virtually everywhere. And he said that Kilwa was one of the finest cities in the world. Now, these are just ruins, but look at that. Look at the history that we have as a people. So this is part of our history. We were, or it's in the languages we speak every day, especially if you're from Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda, Congo. This has always been part of us. We were already trading with the Arabs before the Europeans even dared to come to the continent. And this was happening in like the 8th century, when the Europeans were still struggling in the dark ages, in the early middle ages. So let's not forget this. I keep saying this because I want you to hear it coming through. Let's not forget that this is who we were. Look at that. Absolutely magnificent, beautiful work. Now, let's talk about the Benin Kingdom, because the Benin Kingdom kind of confuses me sometimes. Because when I first heard of the Benin Kingdom, I thought it was in Benin, but it's actually in present-day Nigeria, which we're going to talk about this some other day, because I've mentioned it in like 4 videos now. About how Europe's borders, the borders that you're seeing in that picture, the borders that are white, they ruined our borders. They just cut across people's countries and people's tribes, and they just named things randomly. Some countries renamed themselves, like Burkina Faso. I mean, Tanzania is a name that Tanzanians came up with, but some countries just given names and then they stuck by them. And this is my official point where I'm going to petition some countries to change their names. South Africa, I'm looking at you. Anyways, now the Benin Kingdom produced, they're most famous for their bronze plaques, which, can you see? Pause. Let's pause. Can you see the art? Can you see how intricate this is? And you people are trying to tell me the Mona Lisa is better than this. You must be crazy. You must be crazy. These people are doing this with hand tools. We didn't have machines. Again, we didn't have machines. We didn't have like things to carve. We were using our hands and like handheld tools. People crafted this. And do you want to take a random guess where these statues are? They're not in Nigeria. They're not in Benin. They're in the British Museum in London. I went to the British Museum in London to see it for myself, because I was like, am I dreaming? Is something going on? Am I missing something? They were literally there. And I'm just wondering, I'm like, why haven't they returned it? But look at this. Just look at the close-up. You're trying to tell me that somebody with a low IQ did this. Somebody who is not ambitious, somebody who's not curious, somebody who's not artistic, somebody who is not in contact with the elements in their environment did that. That is not even possible. You cannot convince me. You absolutely cannot convince me that happened, because Benin's art and city planning, not just this, but it's just a masterpiece. And I think one of the issues with people seeing this is that we're used to such a Eurocentric view of the world, but we need to start reclaiming these parts. And look at that wall. We're talking about the Great Wall of China. Let's talk about the Great Wall of the Benin Kingdom first. All right. Now, last but not least, speaking of Nigeria, because I mentioned Nigeria and they are the largest population in Africa, the Oyo Kingdom. Now, they're associated with the Yoruba. They existed between the early 13th century to like 1800s. And what I found most interesting about the Yoruba, because I have always loved this concept of like African philosophy, and I didn't even know, and it's shameful to admit that, but I didn't even know that we had already philosophies that were existing in Africa. The Yoruba people have something called the Ifa divination system. It has 256 chapters of oral texts, and it guides their ethics. They also could mess around with astronomy. And you're telling me that this is inferior to what the Europeans had? Absolutely embarrassing. They could no, I don't know how this actually works, to be 100% frank, but I'm just impressed that people had their own traditions and the ways of determining how to go about society. I know, like the Yoruba, for example, they had a council of chiefs and they checked the king's power. So that's a system of checks and balances. And they already had like over 100 1,000 plus people to guide. So again, we were not just sitting around like monkeys. We weren't speaking monkey talk. We were communicating with each other. I can do this in a whole nother video. We had our own languages. We had our own food systems. And you're telling me, oh yeah, the French cuisine is the best cuisine in the world. No, it's not. No, it's not. We already had these systems for ourselves. And I think as a continent, it's time we start reclaiming that prideful identity, not to be like, oh, egotistical. No. Pride in ourselves, to remember that we come from great people. We have been made to think we only come from slaves, but that's not the truth. That was a brief moment in our history. But for the majority of our history, we've always been great. And we're now still in survival mode. And it angers me so much. We need to get up. We need to get up and remember who we are. I do not want my kids to live in the same Africa that I have grown up in. It has to change. And one of the ways that we need to start changing this is by our mindset, to remember who the heck we are. We are great. So I'm going to keep talking about Africa on this channel. If you want to come along for the ride, feel free to subscribe. Feel free to like, to comment, to share. Did I miss anything? Did I get anything wrong? Let me know in the comment section. And you will see me in the next video. Bye.